take or we doubt we gon' make it. Show the world that I shine in our greatness. Keep it real, never gon' fake this. Till we make it, taking off flying high like a spaceship.
Hello everybody, this is Danny with Shake the Earth podcast. We've got some special guests on today. Ethan Brown and Megan Brown, they are the founders of the Sweet Tooth Fairy. I've known Ethan and Megan for, 10 years now?
It's got to be.
Long
and
time.
They've got a pretty cool story, a pretty sweet story that they're going to share today. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about what the Sweet Tooth Fairy is, how you started, and we're going to dive into some of these practices that we were talking about, and how you built this brand. So tell us how it started, where you were. I remember where you were, but tell us a little bit about that.
All right, so the Sweet Tooth Fairy is a gourmet bake shop, and we specialize in all things sweet, from cookies to cakes to brownies to ice cream, just pretty much anything like that. But kind of where it all started was my kitchen counter when I was a little girl, just sitting up in the kitchen, hanging out with my mom there. And that's really where I learned to love what I consider an art form for baking. And just throughout my life, I just spent a lot of time in there. It was kind of like my creative outlet. And as I got older, I found myself always working kind of in the food industry. I worked in a bakery in high school. When I came to college, I worked, different restaurants and serving and whatnot. Anyway, there's lots of boring details in between, but Ethan and I, we were married, and I was kind of just doing catering stuff on the side, and he jumped in and would help with events, and we would do corporate gifting, and anyway, we kind of found ourselves jobless. It was in 2008, and
Perfect time to start a business.
Yeah, exactly.
Or get a job, right?
Yeah, 2008, the market had crashed. Ethan was working in the housing industry for a company that was directly tied to the housing market, and so he waltzed into work one day, and they were like, thanks, but no thanks. Here's all your stuff. Everyone in your department has been
At that
let go.
point, we had been doing Sweet Tooth Fairy out of the house.
Yeah,
we were doing a lot of custom cakes and custom catering orders and that sort of thing. And so we were both going to work 9 to 5 and then doing that on the side.
It was like a side hobby.
It was a
'cause you
total,
liked it. You loved doing
it was
it.
just, it was just for fun. I had been working for a U.S. congressman. I had a full-time job there. He had been working, he had a full-time job as well. And so it was a total hobby that I just loved to do. It was just for fun.
Did you ever think, okay, at some point this is gonna turn into more than just a hobby?
So, yes, but it was.
But you probably weren't ready for it.
No,
right?
not ready for it, and definitely not not a plan. It was just down the road, it would be so fun if we ever had a store. And I feel like I always knew it was going to be bigger than just us in our basement.
Yeah.
But it was never I had some plan to execute how that was actually going to happen. But it kind of just happened because
you were forced into it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the great thing with Meg is that she can see, 100 years down the road. She sees the long view vision and doesn't have to work or doesn't get hung up on the little details that the obstacles you're trying to overcome in the moment.
Yeah.
That was my job.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people...
Wait, we got to pay mortgage, we got to take care of kids.
A lot of people, that's when they quit, is when they actually realize, okay, my day-to-day needs aren't met. I can't pursue this anymore. I have to go get a day job and then their hobbies or their real passions kind of fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's, I think what you're saying is that I am not based in reality. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm totally
most
kidding.
entrepreneurs are not,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's
most
a
entrepreneurs
definite
aren't.
skill set to be able to see a vision. When we're making cakes for a birthday party, and they're spending a few $100s on a first birthday cake that's ornate, I'm worried about every specific detail, and she's obviously taking care of that. But in the back of her mind, she's thinking, how can we take this to everybody? How can we make sure that we help everyone have a memory like this for their first birthday?
Yeah.
And so she has this in the back of her mind at all times. She has this vision of, I know where I want to take it. Where I would say I'm more like, yeah, that's great, but let's figure out what we need to get
Getting
through
back
today.
to reality.
So,
But that's been where we've worked well together, where she excels in a lot of areas I don't, and vice versa. So it's been good
this
that way.
year is
nice.
how many years?
9 since we opened our first store. Yeah. So like 9.5 pretty much. Yeah. So in January, it'll be 10 years. And it's interesting because, so my dad was an entrepreneur, and I don't even think I really knew what that meant until we started down this journey. But I just always, I would see him up late in the garage tinkering or in the office, or he was, always off just doing what I considered at the time probably like random jobs, random work. But I knew he didn't work for anyone. He worked with people, but he didn't have a 9-to-5 type of thing. So I was kind of used to just like, all right,
do you think that played into you becoming an entrepreneur?
Yes, for sure.
Looking back on it.
100%.
Okay.
Because when we were operating out of our home, I mean, Utah has a cottage food, they have a license they can issue you through the Department of Agriculture. So you can legally and lawfully make stuff and sell it out of your home. And so that's what we were.
Which is a funny story that I remember about you.
Yeah.
I've known you since you were making them in your house.
Yeah.
We have mutual friends, and I would go over to your place and steal your cake bites from your counter. You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And,
well, now I do. So.
Now you know. I'm confessing to you, and you can expect a check in the mail from me.
Thank you.
But I remember that. I remember it was, and it's cool for me to be able to look back and see all that you've done, and that's what I want to go into is where you started.
Sure.
Really not thinking you were an entrepreneur, being forced into kind of diving into it, both of you. And then also how the two of you have made it work, because it cannot be easy, always working together, because there's different personality traits, there's different roles and responsibilities, but and how you've been able to grow this to what it is today, which is quite impressive.
Well, that's nice of you to say. Okay, so now
tell
where
me,
do you want to?
So what I want to go back to is you lose your jobs.
Yeah.
You're faced with this decision. Do you go get another job, which is a logical and safe move that a lot of people make,
right? Or
do you go and basically double down and say, okay, we're going to invest a lot of time, resources, energy into building what this vision is, right?
So that's kind of where going back to the entrepreneurial thing, and I think I'm hoping this will resonate with a lot of people, but for me, it was just something that I knew we needed to do. It was when you have that thought, that impression, whatever you want to call it, where it's you can't stop thinking about it, you're planning, just everything that's going on in your heart and your mind is this is going to happen.
A little bit of obsessive compulsive,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. And so...
and it wasn't for the money, huh?
No, not at all. Because, no. We just were kind of shooting from the hip, but it was something that for me, I was I know we need to do this. And so once Ethan was on board, not that he wasn't ever fully opposed to, but again, he's so amazing, and he everything has to make sense on paper in order for this to be, our livelihood. But we would go and talk with friends, with, family, and say, hey, here's kind of this idea. And when you would look at it on paper, and I remember specifically talking with my mom at one point, and she's like, why would you do this? If you operate out of your home, we had 2 little kids at the time. Our mortgage was essentially our rent that we would be an additional cost that we would incur if we were to take it out of our home. It didn't really make a lot of sense. I talked to my former boss, and he told me it was a terrible, terrible idea. I love you, Chris, but Chris, love you.
We'll give you a chance to explain yourself.
But it was just something that I was okay, thanks, but no, thanks for your input. But I still just felt even though it didn't maybe pencil out on paper, it was something that we were gonna do. And I am just kind of the personality that I just thought, I don't want to live my life thinking I shoulda, woulda, coulda, or what if. And so we got into a 1-year lease. We just drove around our little city looking for places that were open. We had no clue what we were doing in terms of like market research or, foot traffic or anything. I was just like, we just need a space so we're not meeting people in obscure parking lots, like doing a cake delivery, So anyway, we kind of, we talked to my grandma, bless her sweetheart, and we talked to Eth's dad, and they gave us a loan.
A little bit of money.
Seed money. It wasn't a ton. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it was about $20,000 altogether. We spent a lot of time on Craigslist, just getting equipment. My family, my brothers helped out with building out the shop. Eth was still working at the time, so, he spent a lot of time going to work, and then
I was working with East Coast clients, and so I'd get to work. Being in Utah, I'd get to work at 7 a.m. so I could be closer when they were getting into work. So I'd work from 7 till 5, and then after that, we'd go to the shop and figure out what we could do to help the contractor to kind of speed things up as far as the build out. And then once things were open, I would help Meg get there, get the kids situated, wash dishes, mop floors, and this is all before 7 a.m. or after 5.
And I should clarify, I lost my job first.
Yeah.
But when we opened the store, it was just a couple months after that Ethan but I had this cushy federal employee gig that I had been doing for 9 years up until then. And so
you thought you were safe.
Totally. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah. And so it worked.
Describe the feeling of when you finally started investing either your money or other people's money. 'Cause I'm an entrepreneur as well. You kind of know, but I always have this rush, this feeling of adrenaline and fear and doubt and excitement anytime I put resources, whether it's $1,000 or $100,000 into anything. You always have that moment where you actually hand it over to somebody or something. And what was that like? Do you remember feeling, okay, we're going to borrow this money, we're going to pay a contractor, we're going to sign a lease? What were those feelings at that time?
Do you want to
It's scary as all get out.
Scary.
Even once you have that money, it's very scary because the potential, you see where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But I think it's a defense mechanism where your brain automatically goes to, well, what if this happens or that happens, and it starts creating this list in your mind of all the bad things that are inevitably going to happen. And so when you have that idea in concept in your mind, you're like, well, I could see where Sweet Tooth Fairy could go in 5 or 10 years and how great it could be for our family and other people's families. It's safe there. There's no action you have to take.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a comforting feeling that's amazing. That's a great idea. But when you start to apply okay, now we need to pay a contractor. Now we need to go drive down to Vegas because we can get a piece of equipment there for $500 less than in Salt Lake. So let's, make the sacrifice to do that. It gets very scary because you're like, well, what if the equipment doesn't work? Or what if,
all of the
employees
problems
don't
of
show
reality
up,
set in.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, and so you start kind of getting in your own way. What if you're not careful and keep that in perspective?
You obviously pushed through that, right? I mean, because here you are 10 years later almost, and
did we push through?
Maybe. Well, we were talking before the podcast of you're constantly having to reevaluate yourself and your business and the decisions you're making every single day.
For sure.
And I know for me, you never really get to a safe place.
No.
Yeah. You're always either reinvesting or hiring more people, or you're deciding we're going to expand more, we're going to open up more stores.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You're constantly putting yourself in what I call you have to get used to being uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people think that you've made it or success or whatever you want to call it is this line in the sand that once you've crossed, you don't have those issues. You've overcome those issues. And I don't think that's what it is at all. It's in the moment, what are you doing to create little wins or little successes? And so those thoughts in the back of your mind of what if things fall apart tomorrow, or what if this bad thing happens, those never go away.
Never goes away.
In fact, probably get a little bit bigger, because you have more on the line if you have a few stores that all go down tomorrow. You now have a few landlords you got to figure out how to pay.
So I guess Biggie was correct. Like mo money, mo problems. Like, it's like
I wouldn't even
gotta
say
get
the
there.
money part, but
just mo problems.
Just
mo
mo
problems.
Just mo problems is the harder you try.
But I think what you can do though is you create kind of a tendency to, yes, that could happen. That negative thing could happen, but you know from previous experience that even if it does, it's not gonna.
Probably not the end of the world.
It's not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah, and I have to say too, like, my dad, I rely a lot. My dad has since passed away, but I rely a lot on his little bits of wisdom that he taught us as kids. And one of the things was just that he would always say is just like, at the end of the day, it's all going to work out, And so we've had stores that we've opened and they've performed for a few years, and then after we analyze kind of the numbers, and we've made decisions to close them just because you kind of weigh out the risks and the benefits, and so some might call that or a store failing or whatnot, but at the end of the day it's like, okay, well, it's going to be fine. We're going to deal with it one way or another, and we're going to move on, and time's going to pass, and we're going to be able to have the hindsight of what would we have done differently. Would we maybe have put it somewhere else, or would we have hire different, whatever it is, you look at it as an opportunity to grow and to shift and adapt and change. And so I think just kind of having that perspective of like, and that's kind of going back to just the dynamic in our relationship. I'm kind of just way more like, whatever happens, keep rolling. Like we're going to get knocked down, but we'll get up again.
Yeah. And Ethan's like, bank account, finances, accounting, process.
Yeah, but and we've always said, our worst case scenario is still pretty okay. Like we can pick up the pieces, and we feel a heavy responsibility to our franchise partners and to our employees, and so you always have that going as a motivating factor. But again, we feel like if we stay committed to the reason why we're doing this and to our passion, and we hold tight to that, even though it's hard sometimes, right? Sometimes we lay in bed at night and we're like, all right, what give me the number that it would take for us to walk away from this. Sometimes it's a $20 bill.
That's the reality of it, though.
Yeah, just to be like, what are we doing? Why are we worth this? But it always comes back, I think, me personally, you might feel differently, but it just always comes back to that, like, no, this is what we chose. This is the bed we made. We're going to lay in it. And at the end of the day, it's all going to be okay. And even if we make mistakes and we have failures, as some would call it, we can grow and use that as a new, calibrated platform to then a jumping off point to be like, okay, well, here we are now in this moment. What are we going to do to move forward to keep going,
I really think what you said there is impactful, especially for anybody listening. Like that's where most people stop. Mm-hmm. Like I think there, if you look at people like yourselves or successful entrepreneurs or people that are really good at, let's just say anything, sports, whatever it might be, there's a time where they question and say, is it worth it? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, you know what, it's not worth it. Like it's not at all worth me keep, going and doing something for a prolonged amount of time. Even if the benefit is there, some people may say not it's even worth it, right? Yeah. And so I think you were telling me, Ethan, like last week or a couple weeks ago, like you might have in a week, you might have 5 losses. Like each day could be a loss, right? But you have 2 of those days that are wins. Most people look at that as like, well, that's a failure. Like you're underperforming. But the way you look at it, like together as a couple and business owners and like entrepreneurs, is like, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Like really, if you're winning 2 times out of 7 days, like you can grow and build a business.
Yeah.
Most people
if
see
I can
that.
keep that ratio at 10 or 20%, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I can have
and again,
2
when we
wins
say,
for every 10.
When we say losses, people don't really know what goes into all the hard work that goes into running and starting a business, like starting a business, running a business, like headcount, employees. Like I want to go into that as well, because to give some perspective on how labor intensive your business is, because it is, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of people that rely on you. And how many locations do you have?
So we have 9 locations now.
Okay.
Yeah, and here in Utah and in Arizona. And one of the things we often say too is like, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like you go into it and you're
Being naive is sometimes really good because it gets you into the door, and then
For
sometimes
sure.
you're like, "Wow, I am an idiot for doing
Yeah,
this." Like,
right?
I would never have done that, knowing all the problems.
oh
that-
no, like just things like payroll taxes. Like,
Yeah,
what are,
you don't think about that.
what are those? You know?
I have to pay an accountant now, like to do my taxes. Like, wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, so between those locations, there's about 150.
Yeah, probably about
employees.
150. We have the 9 retail locations. We have a central kitchen that helps service them, and it also fulfills our web sales.
Yeah,
And so we have staff there as well. And then the franchisor entity that is more training and support for the franchises and stuff. So of all of those, we have about 150
Yeah.
So
employees.
at any given moment, you have 150 people who are depending on the decisions you're making every day. Right? I mean,
When
No-
you put
no.
it that way.
no pressure.
Yeah,
Right? There's no pressure.
no pressure.
Like, and it's also humbling, but it's also like all the decisions you've made up to this point, the good and the bad, because surely you've made bad decisions,
Sure.
like we all do, and I've made them. But like all of that is like a culmination of what you're doing now. Like those people rely on that, right?
Right. Well, and I think too, I mean, just like the market changes and, technology becomes a factor and just convenience and whatnot. And so again, you kind of have to, maybe a system or a concept that we had established 8 years ago, fast forward to now, maybe it's a little outdated, or we need to catch up with, the businesses that are jumping in right now where they already have this, technology or convenience or whatever it is that you want to call it. But
And how do you keep cupcakes and cake bites and cakes like relevant to all the changes that are happening, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you utilize like technology on demand or direct to home shipping, which is I know you guys are getting into that, and then also some of your like strategic partnerships with some of these big companies. I'll let you talk about, but like you're always constantly having to adapt. Like, is something as simple as like a beautiful cupcake has to be adaptable today to me. Like, my kids are on social media or going to be on social media, and like, how do you use social media to introduce a cupcake
To help.
for crying out loud? Like, it's constantly
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Well, and that's, I think, where our why, we always refer to it as our why, but why are we in business? Why is Sweet Tooth Fairy around? And this may be, something that is specific to us, but also transferable to some of your listeners, in that Megan didn't have these ideas to create this brand so that we could make $1 million. The idea was that so much of this life is experiential, and we want to experience memories, right? So our mission statement is baking memories one batch at a time, which may be a little cliche or cheesy or whatever.
Super cheese ball,
We
but
try
it
to keep
works.
I try to keep it light.
I love it.
But we go back to that when we've run into these difficult issues, or even as we're experiencing success and the stores are doing well. We always keep that in the back of our mind. Or are we allowing our customers, our employees, and ourselves to have great memories? And I think that has helped us kind of stay on a path that is keeping us headed in the right direction.
I love that. Like, I tell some of our employees and just people that we work with, like, your why has to be greater than the daily challenges you face. If it is, then that's your that's your safe place.
Always.
In the storm that's your default.
Yeah.
Your why, like, it might be your kids, it might be your family, it might be this vision to bake memories every single day with people. Because again, you're not selling cupcakes, right?
No.
I can go do that, probably not as good as this. I know not, but like, what you're doing is you're providing parents and kids with a reason to connect.
Exactly.
Right? And that's the beauty of it. You're actually creating something of value. It just so happens that your medium is cupcakes.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I mean, for me, like, it's so my definition of success is when, we get pictures sent in or emails or just talking to people, customers, like, oh, we had your cupcakes at our little girl's first birthday party, or the wedding, or, birthdays, graduations, funeral. I mean, just whatever it is, all these life moments that we all experience, knowing that our stuff is part of those.
The connection.
The connection. That's for me where I like that is success for me. Just that's what makes me give me all the feels. It's really
like
it's really special.
I love that, and this hopefully will tie into that because we've talked a lot about how hard things are, and you guys have been super open. I think that's the real part of this conversation. I want to talk about some of the tipping points and some of the home runs, because you guys have done a lot of things right. Like I remember
That's generous.
I remember going from stealing your cake bites on your countertop to you were on TV and you use social media like incredibly well. And so I want to talk about some of maybe the big tipping points that you experienced early on that kind of gave you maybe momentum and encouragement to keep going.
Sure.
And then also how you're using social media today, because it's super creative. And I see you making pastries, and it's like locks me in. All of a sudden, I'm like, how are they making these pastries? And it's like mesmerizing.
Oh, yes.
So I think that's really a unique way of how you're using social media, and maybe some tips for people on how, if they have a little side hobby or something right now.
Yeah.
How would you recommend they use social media? Right. So talk about your early on hits, because I remember seeing you on TV and I'm like, oh, she's like a big deal now.
No. Well, so probably the biggest one, like before we actually opened our doors, we were contacted by the Rachel Ray Show, and they had this little snippet on her show that's called the Snack of the Day. And kind of the guidelines is that it has to be like a fairly small, independently owned company that they feature. And so we provided cake bites for her studio audience. And it was just this tiny little blurb that appeared on her show where she said
5 seconds.
10 seconds long. But then we received like local press about it, And so I think that really helped snowball. I mean, we had, again, kind of been doing stuff in the community before then. And then we had our store opening, and then we were able to say featured on the Rachel Ray Show. And then Disney reached out to us, and we catered, the premiere of one of their in Hollywood, one of their movies. And then Cupcake Wars reached out. I mean, it just kind of like
the next thing
kept snowballing,
Opened up the opportunity for the next thing. Kept going.
Yeah, and then we've had some really cool opportunities. We've been on a few different shows.
You weren't just on Cupcake Wars.
Yeah,
Tell us what the outcome was there.
Well, we won. So I've been on.
She's so humble. Like I have to I told her before this. I'm like, you're gonna have to embellish. I know it's gonna be hard for both of you.
Yeah.
But like you've done. Yeah, you're super humble about it. But like you won it.
Yeah, we won.
That's kind of a big deal.
It was cool. It was super fun. Yeah, and then I went on a few more times. Didn't necessarily have the same outcome, but it was still
great exposure.
Super
Good
great
experience.
exposure. Yeah. And we went on QVC. I don't know if people know what that is, but it's like we went on there a dozen times or so. We sold 36,000 cake bites in 7 minutes.
36,000 cake bites in 7 minutes.
Yeah. So that was interesting. That was interesting.
Ethan's sitting there like, the accounting, the supply chain,
all
that. He's like going into like the whole process.
We had 2 days from the time that came off air. We had 2 days to fulfill that order to get them out the door. And so production of cake bites went into overdrive.
Hyper.
We had
Hyper.
dozen extra people, 2 shifts. We were there the whole time, both shifts, just trying
to make it work. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
so 4 or 5 times on Cupcake Wars.
Yeah, and then QVC.
Yep.
And
she ended up going back on the Rachel Ray Show.
Rachel Ray Show again.
They did a follow-up because she had grown so much since then. She's done 3.
She's like still hesitant. I'm having to tease this out of her. Like you've done a lot of good things. Like
3 Hollywood premieres. The last one was Thor Ragnarok.
We did Thor Ragnarok just in the fall.
Which is a lot of fun. I stayed at home. I didn't
with the kids.
It was right before. So we have 6 kids, I should say. And we've done, we've just toted them around this whole time. We've had some really great help, family and cousins and friends that like lived with us and helped with the kids. But it was like a month.
Cupcake Wars was the best because it was down in California. So she would spend 3 days of
filming.
in the studio.
And yeah.
And I'd take the kids to the beach. That was my job.
Yeah.
So I think you touched on a bunch of things. There's so many things. This podcast can go on forever, but like you're a working mom with how many kids again? Say that again. 6 kids. You just had your 6th 6 months ago?
6 months ago, yeah.
And the whole purpose of this like podcast is to help people feel like capable. Like what you've done is almost impossible, right? Like Ethan, you kind of head up like the operations and like the business side of the business, and like how is it working together? Like you have 6 kids.
Yeah, a lot.
You
can
have
say a lot.
you have half a dozen kids.
Yeah, I know we did it all. It was strategic, like a half a dozen,
But like how do you manage that like as a family? Because you got a lot. You get 6 kids. I have 2, and I feel like I'm getting spread pretty thin with like soccer and like stuff like that. But like,
Ethan always says, with the right amount of neglect, anything is possible.
That's my mantra that I go to.
Ethan and we're both outdoorsmen. I know you like going outdoors with your kids and like spending outdoor time.
Yeah.
And that's probably one way you connect with your kids.
Well, there's a lot of work for family. Making sure their needs are met. You have, like you've already touched on, employees in the stores and the franchise, the partnerships that we have. There's a lot of work, and so it is important for me to be able to step away from it and find some solace.
We've been in the mountains a few times together, huh?
Yeah, I can breathe a little deeper up there. It's nice.
Yeah. How do you do it? Because this is important for you as well.
Well,
and our listener, who's going to be.
Yeah. So, I still I love what I do so much. Like for me, still, when I can get in the zone and just decorate a cake or work on a recipe, that for me is like the equivalent of going up in the mountains still. Okay. But I mean, as far as like how we did it, it kind of goes back, like my personality is such that's just like, we made a decision to do this together, and we have to do what it takes to fulfill those obligations. Again, my dad would always say, like, I'm a slave to duty. And I can do that cheerfully. I can do that. I could choose to do it uncheerfully, but I would rather have that kind of perspective. And, what that means for me is a lot of late nights, odd hours, taking kids to the office. We have an incredible support network just in our neighborhood and family and friends. And so being able to offload, even now, like during the summertime, like, hey, do you want to have the kids for today while we go up to work? But I just, I often look back and reflect and ask, like, how did we do it with all these littles? When we first opened, we literally turned one of our, a room, it used to be a bathroom, turned pantry, turned like a little nursery. And we would like take the 2 little kids, put them there. We had to put carpet down. We had toys. We took them along.
Player in there.
And now fast forward again, almost 10 years, and like we'll bring our kids in to the warehouse and we'll have them label stickers. We had them there over the weekend, washing the windows and sweeping. I mean, we're trying to instill within them this work ethic. Yeah. And I think it's neat, especially to see nowadays, like for our kids to see, mom works, mom gets to work with dad, and they make it work and they get to be part of it. And so it's funny, Jack, our oldest, he's almost 12, but the other day he was like, do I get to take over the family business at some point?
You get to buy the family business for all the sweat equity that mom
He
and dad
obviously
have
doesn't know what that means.
Yeah. I know.
A lot of work to that.
One of the things that I think is impressive, because I've known you for those 10 years roughly, is that you've been able to do all that, go from really building this in your home to 9 locations, 150 employees, all the wonderful things you've accomplished without losing, I think, the most important perspective, which is your family. Like, you haven't let the successes or the failures really dictate the outcome on your family, right? It's just you're not defined by your business, right? You're more focused on your family,
right?
And a lot of people, it's either or. Like, I could be super successful and never be home, or I can have a poor relationship with my wife and but I can have a $100 million business. Like, you can trade those things off pretty easily, and a lot of people will. But from what I've seen, now I don't know if Ethan, maybe he's a closet. I don't know. I was gonna say something mean to him, but like from what I see, you guys have a really great relationship. I mean, you work hard. I'm sure it's not easy all the time.
We still like each other.
Yeah. It's pretty great.
I think that it goes back to your definition of success, just anyone's personal definition of success. For Megan and I, family is a huge part of just personal success. If our family's not doing well and the business is, we're not feeling successful. Now there's a balance there. And it was tough early on because we would take kids to board meetings, or I remember sitting in a conference room with our landlord signing a lease that was 200 pages long, and our little daughter was a few months old.
Not ideal situation.
Not necessarily ideal.
But then we would bring him to the office, but then sometimes we'd have to stay at home and we'll work late nights. I remember going to get stuff at 2 a.m. at Walmart because we had forgotten to order something. And we eventually were able to what I call create arenas, where when we get home, we put everything down and we work on kids and we spend time with them. And that allows us to be when we're at the office. Sometimes the kids are there and whatnot, but they know that mom and dad are working or getting stuff done. And part of that is that duty that we have a responsibility to get what we need to done from 9 to 5 as best we can. Now, sometimes it doesn't always stay in those hours. But
and we can get kids down, have family time, and then you make the sacrifice to go back up, or go back up to the office, get stuff done, or continue to work, so that when you have those arenas that you're present and you're there. And
I think it's important for kids to see that, like, it's not just a dream. Like, it's not, there's actually working being done, right? And they can see that in a more intimate setting versus saying just having a 9 to 5 job. That's not to say having a 9 to 5 job is a bad thing.
No, not at all.
The path that you've chosen affects your kids too.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it really is a different path.
One of the things. Go ahead. The other thing I was going to mention, trying not to get too far away from your microphone here, is that we work well together because we're somewhat opposite in some of the duties. Meg's very creative. She has that vision, and I feel kind of
the first time you heard that.
I've heard, so kind of you to say.
She's also beautiful.
Patient. Okay, wait, keep going. No, I was kidding.
And so I don't feel like I have to speak for the vision, or what are we doing with this brand in 10 years?
It's taken care of because it's in
and
good
she
hands.
is able to be the visionary, and where I can kind of take a more managerial role, saying, okay, if that's the vision, how do we execute that on a weekly and a daily and a monthly basis? What systems do we need to put in place to be able to make that happen? And she doesn't have to worry about those things, which allows that creative mind to continue to flourish.
So you actually you mesh really well with what your strengths are, right?
Like, well, and people kind of, I get it a lot. Like, friends will be like, oh, if I had to work with my husband, I'd die. Like kind of that, if I had to be with him every day type of thing. And I don't know. I still like him. He's like my best buddy. And we do like he was saying, we do such different things that it's not like
you're not competing.
We're not like this every day, like 8 inches away, just working on the same thing, So, and we're able to kind of play on our strengths that are kind of at opposite ends of the business spectrum, and so it works.
We divide and conquer a lot.
Yes, divide and conquer.
And it tells. You can tell. I mean, visually from the outside, you could tell that you guys work really well together. I want to ask a couple questions. Some of them might be hard, or at least answer these like with the listener in mind. Like, what would you be considered a regret maybe on the business on the career side? Maybe it was a bad decision, or because I think a lot of people sometimes feel if I make a bad decision, I must be bad at making decisions always, and so they stop making decisions. And so I know that for me, when I make a bad decision and I regret, I try to separate myself from it and be a little bit nicer to myself so that I'm not afraid or gun shy of making decisions going forward. Yeah. So like what would be one, and you don't have to go into great detail, but like maybe just what the impact was. And then I've got a couple questions that I want you to answer for our listeners as well.
Do you want to go
Let me
first?
start. It is a tough question because there are a lot of regrets. There are a lot of missteps that happen. a lot of what we have learned about business has been trial and error. And those are the most expensive lessons because you end up spending a ton of your capital on fixing them. You spend money on making the decision, and then you have to spend twice as much to fix it. You spend a lot of time and energy. You get exhausted because of those missteps. I think one of the biggest, maybe not regret, but just one of the biggest missteps, maybe I'll relabel, was the first time we closed a store. We had to go to the landlord and say, we're not able to make the rent, and this isn't the right location for us. And there were still some months of rent left, and so we had to figure out a way to make that happen. It was frustrating for me because here we had built this brand and we had one store that was underperforming, and we thought it's not doing what it needs to do, and we can take and do another store somewhere else. But it's almost like this personal reflection of like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not making these decisions correctly? If you take a step back, or if you're looking at it from the outside, it's just a store that wasn't the right spot, it wasn't the right center, it just needs to move. But unfortunately, you don't look at that as a business owner. You look at it as like, what's wrong with me? What have I done wrong?
Yeah, the decision you made must be a reflection on you.
Exactly, and so you take it personal. And it's difficult to overcome that. But that's where it's, I think, again, been helpful for us to have each other on off hours, right? Because I'll be able to kind of voice some of these frustrations and concerns, and she'll be able to talk me down off the ledge. But at the same time, you have these missteps, and that's why I call them missteps, is that you learn so much more in the missteps than from the successes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking about this about a month ago. I've been trying to go back to the gym and mitigate some of what has happened to me over the last 10 years.
That's hard for you looking at this right here. Like I'm like tempted right now.
Yeah. No, the point I'm making there though is that I've been really excited because I've been hitting these personal records of different lifts. Lifting has always been important to me. So
he's very strong.
But what
is a strong guy.
The epiphany that I had was that like it's frustrating when you're there. You feel unsuccessful. You're sweaty. You're tired. Your muscles are sore. You ache for 2 or 3 days after. Yeah. But then you grow and you develop, and so you have all this pain that you go through, but if you persevere through that, then you benefit from it.
At some point, you come out.
Exactly. So you lose a store, you close it, but you learn, okay, well, parking was awful there. The tenants that were next to us were not very complimentary. Maybe there were some staffing issues that we would have done differently. Mm-hmm. You learn all these things, and they're expensive lessons.
Yeah, you wouldn't otherwise learn.
Yeah, but those are the things that define the future successes, because now you can make even better decisions. Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that's also another point where people stop or they quit, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, okay, I failed, I made bad decisions, I'm not an entrepreneur, or I'm not going to be as successful as I thought I was. Whereas if they would have continued through, maybe change some of the way they're managing things, or close this location, let's go find another one that's better. Like here's a land development project that this is where we really want to be. Right. Constantly being resilient. Do you have have one?
Well, so yeah, without going into like super specifics, I think one thing that, I think the worst decision is indecision, because it forces a decision, right? Yeah. So there have been,
and usually a bad decision,
right? Yeah, and so there have been instances, circumstances where we're just like kind of in limbo, like I don't know. We talk about it. I don't know, and then just it's at that point something's going to happen, and it's quote unquote out of your control at that point, right? Yeah. And so I think those are also kind of the painful ones where you're like, we should have this. We should not have just not addressed it, or whatever it is. And so, so kind of in hindsight, that sting is the biggest lesson. And so I think it kind of helps us remember, like, no, we have to decide on this now because we don't want the decision to be made for us at a later point.
You might as well have some say in the decision.
Well, once you've made a decision, the anxiety goes away.
Yeah.
Right? You have so much anxiety leading up. What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? And as soon as that decision is made, it's almost like a switch in your head flips, and the anxiety goes away, at least for me. And then now, okay, I've made the decision. Now I just have to see it through.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think your biggest piece of advice for a young entrepreneur, male or female, or a middle-aged entrepreneur, somebody that wants to get into starting their own business, or maybe they have a hobby right now that could be a business?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think that your biggest piece of advice to them would be right now?
I mean, it's going to sound so cheesy, but it's like, follow your gut, follow your heart, cultivate your passion, stick with it.
That goes back to like having your why, like really defined, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to go back to. Like that passion for what it is that you want to do, or if you have this thought, this idea, this impression that won't go away, like, just don't ignore it, because it can turn into something really great. Or you'll just always have that assurance of like, okay, I clung to it, I gave it a go, and maybe it didn't pan out the way I thought it would. But you're not going to live your life with this like, oh man, I should have done this. Yeah, I don't.
Because
the
that's
regret.
like the regret.
Yeah.
That's a huge regret for me. It's like
Regret sucks.
Yeah.
This is the worst.
Yeah, and then just also like, honestly, you can figure it out. You can make it work. Like, there are so many resources now, whether it's friends, family, who've started a business of their own, or just to have like a sounding board. There's forums online. I mean, if you need a loan, there's
easier time. There's probably no easier time to get money.
Easier time, especially like for women, right? The small business. There's so many just little different programs that you can apply. You can go talk to people. People are so willing. I feel like that's one of the things that's been helpful for us too on this journey. People who've been through it they really want to help people who are starting, right? Yeah. Because if there's any little tidbit of information or a takeaway that we could provide to someone who's listening, like, that would just be so great, because we want to help people learn from our mistakes, and learn from, our successes as well. But there's just, like, you can figure it out. And if you feel like you can't, go talk to somebody who's done it before, because they'll be able to help you, You
probably experience this. You get so much satisfaction from just sharing some little tidbit that you learned the hard way with somebody. Now they're not going to have to learn it the hard way. There's so many people who want to share.
I like that. And I am a huge proponent of what you just said. Like, ask somebody who's done it before. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised who you could reach out to. I mean, talk about either some athlete or some businessman or woman.
Oh, for sure.
Like, most people really want to help somebody that's hungry.
Yeah.
And if they can see that they're coming to them and asking for advice, all it takes is a tweet, an Instagram message. Like, I before you go into what your recommendation, Ethan, would be, but like, I always look back, now more than any time in the history of the world, there are more opportunities to work for yourself, to build a business, to be self-sufficient, without having to reinvent technology. Like, technology is like this great equalizer. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. I'm not a tech guy, but I use it every single day to build my businesses. And like what you said of being able to ask the right people and then take advantage of opportunities. Like, it's not going to be easy, but it is so possible. And there's so many outlets and resources and free software and free advice, good advice, that you can make it happen.
And there's room for everyone. Like, there's room for all the ideas,
Absolutely. There's room for everyone.
Yeah.
What would you like suggest to somebody?
I'd echo what Meg said. I think that just do it. I think that if you don't, that regret will eat you up. I think that's difficult. I think it's important to kind of ask yourself why you want to do it. I think that the reason for that is that question, or that answer to that why you want to do it, will get you through a lot of the frustrating times. Mm-hmm. If you want to do it because your friends are doing it, or because it's an opportunity in the market and you don't want to get left behind, That'll go away.
Yeah.
It won't carry you through the toughest times. But if you can say, no, this is a core part of who I am and this is why I want to do it, hold tight to that as much as you can, because it'll carry you through. And it'll keep you, as you experience the success as well, it'll keep you on the right path. You're not going to deviate from that course to chase successes that changes who you are, or who your business is, or who you want your business to be, or what you want your business to be, rather. And so I think that's important. We've had a ton of people that have helped us along the way. Ton of she's commented on our neighbors that help with the family and the kids and stuff, but business mentors, advisors. And,
that's another thing I think.
Partners,
a lot of people can oftentimes say, look what I did. I built this, but there's no one who's built anything without the help of either employees, teams, family, mentors, whatever it might be. I would add to and echo what you both have said of like creating your why, make sure it's really clear and that it's something that you can default back to. I always carry a notebook with everywhere I go, and I tell all of our employees and all of our sellers for the current company that I am running, write your goals and your visions down. You're 40% more likely to accomplish them. But before you even do that, like write your why. Mm-hmm. Your why might be your kids. You might be a single mom. You might be a single dad. You might have lost 5 jobs in a row. You might have 5 different failures, starting a business, whatever it might be. But writing your goals down and having your why visually to where you could see it every single day. Like I started my recent company in 2011, but I actually didn't start it until 2014. Like it was in my mind, it was in my book for 3 years, right? Constantly going and adding to it. And I no doubt that was a big benefit to me to have it written down for years, because I could think about it and go back to it and be like, if I were to change it, what would it be like? And what do I want it to mean to people? And so I think you're absolutely right. You have to have a really defined why. Right, because that's your default. That's a safe place you can go back to when the bills come in. Yep. Right.
For sure.
Exactly.
For sure.
Hey, I want to thank you both for coming in today. I have one last question. What's your favorite cupcake? You have to have one. What's your default cupcake?
Toasted coconut cupcake. It's a texture thing, but the trick is to eat it. I have to tear the bottom of the cupcake off, place it on top, and eat it like a cupcake hamburger, like cupcake sandwich. That's a pro tip for you.
Well, and this might come as a surprise or a shock to most people.
I'm kidding.
My favorite cupcake is actually a chocolate chip cookie. I am way more of a cookie brownie bar person than I am a cupcake person, truthfully. But I'm also like a peanut butter freak, so I love the peanut butter cupcake, the Reese's peanut butter cupcake. Yeah.
How many? I'm just more out of curiosity. How many SKUs do you have, or how many variants? Because this is going to go into like you're the visionary, like Vision Factory, and then you're like the production factory.
You're
so
the
you have
like
to marry those two.
So we have hundreds of recipes, but in the bakery on any given day, we have 12 to 15 flavors of cupcakes.
Yeah.
We have 6 to 10 flavors of cookies. We have various brownies and bars.
Our cake bites are little signature items that we're
about a dozen flavors of those. But every month we switch 2 or 4 flavors out of each of those categories and replace it with something else.
Yeah.
And then those don't come back around till the fall.
Kind of got to create the demand. Yeah.
We'll keep it. We want to have staples for our customers, but at the same time, there's
people want variety as well. Like they probably don't order the same thing every single time.
Yeah. Well, and it's been fun too because, like as you were mentioning, we're now shipping online. But recently, I partnered with a local company to kind of put to reality some of like what I call crazy ideas, but just like cake decorating tools and kits and different things. And so not only can people order like our treats online, but now we have like cake stands and sprinkles and party.
So tell us where people can find that. Where can people find you online on social media? Because I think a lot of our listeners, a lot of our customers love Sweet Tooth Fairy, especially here in Utah.
Yeah.
And they actually send them to us as gifts because they know we love them. But like, tell us where can people find you and maybe some of the new products that you're.
Yeah, so
you just recently launched the cool cake stand. It was really
so
cool.
we have. So you can find us. Our handle is at Sweet Tooth Fairy, but our website is thesweettoothfairy.com. But yeah, we have our products like in Joann's and Sur La Table, and you can get them on Amazon and Bed Bath & Beyond and whatnot. And then I am allowed to say this, but
Is this a secret?
this
Are you
is
revealing
a secret. Yes.
Today.
Today. Yeah, I'm doing a cookbook.
Are you serious?
I'm doing a cookbook, yeah.
When does it come out?
So it'll come out in the spring,
Okay.
but so that'll be super exciting.
Are
It's
you-
not going
are-
to be like Sweet Tooth Fairy. It's not going to be the recipes that like people could go on this. It's not the store
Is
recipes.
it like a savory tooth fairy? Because that's that's where you could get me.
It eventually I will do a savory one, but I had to start with
Yeah, you had to
sweets
do
just
that.
because it was like the natural progression of things. But yeah, so that's been a really fun thing too.
That's been occupying her time from about 12:30 to about 3:30 a.m.
And then I'm like, go to work all day, then I come home and I'm working on my cookbook.
We joke
So,
that sometimes success is the fruit of insomnia.
yeah.
And I love this. I think I heard this from a commercial. But like you're the type of people to avoid. You'll work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
That's true.
I didn't hear that until after we started
So
Sweet Tooth
true.
Fairy.
It's
You thought
so
you were signing
true.
up for 40 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's awesome.
Times that by
Yeah.
3.
We're excited.
It's been a wild ride. It's been fun.
So thesweettoothfairy.com and Sweet Tooth Fairy on Instagram and Facebook. You're on there.
Yeah.
Are you okay if I say, hey, some of our listeners have questions or they want to reach out to you?
Totally.
They can contact you that way.
Yeah, I'd love to. That's awesome.
Especially if somebody, again, the whole purpose of the podcast is like help people live better lives and like see people like yourselves doing amazing things despite all the obstacles and trials that you face, and being realistic about it. Because I think a lot of people think, oh man, I want to own my own business. It's going to be the best day ever, and it's not. Yeah. It's like you're riddled with
But it is
decisions
possible.
you have to.
Yeah.
But you can
It's
make
very
it to where
realistic.
you're happy and content with 2 wins out of 7 days, right?
Yeah.
Like.
Well, and you have, there's this, he and I, we go back and forth a lot. There's like this great sense of responsibility, but there's also this great sense of flexibility, right? So at any given day, one or the other might be leading out, but you have the flexibility to go in the mountains and.
Yeah, how many times have I text you or you text me, hey, you want to go up the mountains? And we're like, yeah, let's go.
Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
No problem. Let's do this.
Yep, let's go.
Yep.
Grab my backpack. All right, hey, I want to thank you both.
Thank
You're a great inspiration. You're obviously both really good friends with me and my wife, and I'm glad that you came on to share your story.
Thank you.
So
for having
we're
us.
gonna send this to our listeners, and I'm sure some people are gonna be ordering some Sweet Tooth Fairy because it's addictive.
Oh, you're so sweet. We should do a code.
Let's do it.
Shake the earth. Should we do a
Yeah,
shake the
so
earth
let's do the
code?
Shake the Earth code, and anybody that wants to, Shake the Earth. So that's the name of the podcast. Use that code, and you're gonna get a surprise from the Sweet Tooth Fairy.
Yeah.
Let's
So-
do it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks,
guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.